In April 2010, a 65-year-old man named Liu Shuyun mysteriously disappeared in the small rural village of Xinhua, located in northern China. Initially, the police didn't give it much importance, believing that Liu had simply moved elsewhere in search of a better job. However, just 3 days later, Liu's brother also mysteriously disappeared. At that point, the police realized the situation was serious, and when they began investigating, they uncovered more than they had anticipated. On April 27, 2010, a group of construction workers from the village of Xinhua, located in Heilongjiang, China, was starting their lunch break. However, they were annoyed because the cafeteria where they usually ate was still closed. The group of workers then decided to go after the cook to find out the reason for the delay. They searched several places in the cafeteria, the kitchen, and the pantry, but there was no sign of the cook. This cook was a 65-year-old man named Liu Shuyun. Liu was the oldest in his family, and because of this, he was given the nickname Liu Boss. Since the group of workers couldn't find Liu anywhere on the site, one of them decided to go to his house to see if he was there. They thought perhaps the man had missed work for some reason and hadn't notified anyone because of a problem. When the worker arrived at Liu's house, he found the front door slightly open. He called Liu's name several times, but there was no response. He then entered the house, and although the lights were on, no one was there, so he left empty-handed. After that, no one ever heard from Liu Shuyun again. That day was supposed to be Liu's third day on the job. He had been unemployed for several years, and due to his old age, almost no one was willing to give him a job opportunity. According to those close to him, Liu was very fortunate to get a job as a cook at this construction site, and he was very happy about it. He had divorced at 45 years old and had been living alone ever since. Liu Liu, Liu Shuyun's 49-year-old brother, was the first family member to learn about his disappearance. Liu searched for his brother in several places where he used to spend his free time, but couldn't find him anywhere. After spending the entire afternoon looking for his brother, Liu decided to go to the police station to file a missing person report. The police, however, showed little interest in the case, barely searched for Liu, and didn't even issue a missing person alert. Meanwhile, Liu, the missing man's brother, returned home and, trusting the police, waited for updates. That's when something strange happened. Liu's brother, also disappeared, and no one saw him again. On April 29th, some of Liu's friends went to his house, as they had made plans to do something together. When they arrived at Liu's house, they entered without knocking, as it was customary for them to do so due to their long friendship, and because Liu allowed it. They found the house empty, despite the lights being on, just as the construction worker had found Liu's house a few days earlier. Liu's friends searched the rooms of the house, but there was no sign of him. They then decided to call his cell phone, but it was turned off, which was unusual because Liu never turned off his phone. As I mentioned earlier, the police didn't show much interest in Liu's case. They theorized that the man had left his village without informing his family to seek a better job opportunity. The police believed that Liu would return home in a few days and everything would be resolved. However, after Liu's disappearance, the authorities in Xinhua village found it very strange that two brothers vanished within a span of 3 days. Moreover, days had passed, and there was still no news about Liu, the first brother to disappear. At that point, the police realized the situation was serious and decided to investigate. Initially, they contacted the police from nearby villages to find out if there had been any incidents involving Liu and his brother Liu. They also shared information about the two men. The authorities in the neighboring villages reported that there had been no incidents involving the two brothers. Despite not getting any leads to start the investigation, the police in Xinhua village continued looking into the disappearance of Liu and Liu. On May 7, 2010, 10 days after Liu Shuyun's disappearance and 7 days after Liu's, the authorities in Xinhua village, along with the neighboring villages' authorities, formed a task force to investigate the case. As I mentioned earlier, Liu was 65 years old, and according to those close to him, he didn't care much for digital devices and because of that didn't own a cell phone. He was also somewhat reserved, didn't like going out much, and had few friends. On the other hand, his brother Liu was more sociable, knew many people in the village, and had more friends. Unlike his older brother, Liu liked digital devices, owned a cell phone, and used it frequently. With this in mind, the task force decided to track Lao Liu's cell phone. The authorities obtained his phone records and account information. These records showed that before his disappearance, Lao Liu made and received several calls, but this stopped on the exact day he went missing. After carefully examining Lao Liu's phone records, the police became interested in a specific number among his contacts. Lao Liu had called this number twice. Both calls were made on April 29th, the day he disappeared. This number belonged to Su Hong, a local doctor and the owner of the village's medical clinic. Su Hong had moved to the village 9 years earlier. Her parents had already lived in the village, and when they passed away, she inherited their house. On weekends, Su Hong stayed in this house, which had belonged to her parents. She lived with her daughter, but during the week she stayed in another house owned by her siblings to take care of her 3 nephews. The police went to Su Hong's house to ask her about the calls made by Lao Liu. She told the officers that last year, in 2009, she had borrowed 5,000 yuan from Liu and another 10,000 yuan from Lao Liu. According to her, she used that money to pay for one of her nephew's medical treatments. She said she called Lao Liu so he could come by and collect the money she owed him. Su Hong stated that after she paid him, Lao Liu thanked her and left. Regarding Liu, the older brother, Su Hong said she had repaid him months earlier. The police spoke to several of her neighbors to verify her story. Since the village was small, many residents knew almost everything about each other's lives, and the police hoped to gather relevant information about Su Hong's relationship with the missing brothers. All of the neighbors interviewed by the police confirmed her story and added that Su Hong was a woman of good character. After speaking with Su Hong, the police decided to conduct new searches. These searches were carried out in Xinghua village and nearby villages within a 31-mile radius. The police also focused on investigating people who were not village residents, such as outsiders who were either working there or visiting relatives. In total, the task force spent 3 days conducting investigations and searches, but despite their great efforts, they found nothing. It wasn't until May 10th that a new lead emerged. Liu and Lao Liu's sister went to the police, stating that she had received a text message whose content was linked to the disappearance of her 2 brothers. This message had supposedly been sent by Lao Liu and said the following: "Let me be honest with you. I accidentally took Liu's life. I told him I was going to Shandong to see his son, and he got upset, saying I shouldn't do it. I was drunk, and we argued. He got up and came at me, so to defend myself, I pushed him. He fell and hit his head on the doorframe, and he died. Out of fear, I took his body somewhere else and fled." After analyzing the contents of this message, the police decided to conduct a thorough forensic investigation of both Liu and Lao Liu's homes. According to the authorities, if the message was true, there would be traces in the homes to confirm the brothers' fight. During the investigation, the police used luminol to detect any traces of blood. They also searched for Lao Liu's fingerprints in Liu's house and vice versa. After 2 days of forensic work, the police found no traces of blood or fingerprints. Additionally, both houses were tidy, with no signs of a struggle in either of them. During the investigation, the police also found a sum of 3,000 yuan in Lao Liu's house, which was strange because if he had truly fled, he would have likely taken the money with him. With this, the police concluded that the message was fake. Someone was trying to mislead the authorities, and it was likely that the brothers were no longer alive. Liu and Lao Liu's sister told the police that despite the message coming from his phone, the way it was written was very different from how her brother usually wrote. According to her, Lao Liu did not receive a proper education and therefore often made many spelling mistakes, unlike the message, which was written flawlessly. The authorities tried calling Lao Liu's phone, but once again, it was turned off. Whoever had the phone had simply turned it on, sent the message, and then turned it off again. Later that week, the phone was turned on again and sent the same text message 10 times to various friends and family members of the 2 brothers. A few days later, a new message from Lao Liu's phone was sent to the same people. In this message, Lao Liu admitted to acting alone and claimed that it was all an accident. The message was short, making the police even more certain that Lao Liu was not the one sending them. To the authorities, it made no sense. Someone seemed to be desperately trying to throw them off track. That same week, one of Liu and Lao Liu's brothers went to the police and mentioned something odd that his brother had told him before disappearing, which might help with the investigation. According to him, Lao Liu had been drinking a bit at home and at one point said, "If anything happens to me, Su Hong will be responsible." On May 19th, the police returned to Su Hong's house, and this time they treated her as a suspect. Su Hong answered all of the police's questions calmly and naturally. However, when the police asked if she had any kind of storage room for her belongings, she started to get nervous and said no. The officers noticed her nervousness and found it strange for her to claim she didn't have one, as it was common for everyone in the village to have a storage room to keep food for the winter. Xinghua village is located in northern China, where winters are very cold, and not having a storage room at home was inconceivable to the locals. After noticing Su Hong's nervousness and finding it odd that she didn't have a storage room, the suspicious police decided to search the property. They searched the entire house, and upon reaching the backyard, found an entrance to a cellar hidden under a pile of weeds. As soon as the officers opened the cellar door, they were hit by a strong, foul smell coming from inside. The cellar had clearly not been cleaned for some time and seemed to have been closed for weeks. Because of the unbearable odor, the police were unable to go beyond the entrance. They had to request another police team to bring gas masks so they could proceed. In the meantime, seeing that the officers were about to enter and search her cellar, Su Hong panicked and tried to stop them, but the police warned her that if she didn't let them proceed, she would be arrested. Once the gas masks arrived, the police descended into the cellar. Along the way, they encountered heaps of trash, empty plastic bags, clothing, and even human waste. The cellar floor was unpaved and the soil appeared disturbed. Realizing that something had been buried, the officers began digging. Soon they uncovered two large plastic bags, one blue and the other green. As suspected, they found two bodies inside the bags. The police removed the bags and brought them to the yard. Despite the advanced state of decomposition, the bodies were identified as the missing brothers Liu and Lao Liu. Su Hong was quickly arrested, and the news spread through the village, where many people refused to believe she was responsible. Some residents, in fact, believed it was a misunderstanding and maintained that Su Hong couldn't possibly be guilty. The bodies were sent for autopsy, which initially determined that both brothers had been suffocated. Su Hong was taken in for questioning, and she soon confessed to the crimes. According to her, it was a case of self-defense. She explained that she hadn't repaid the money she borrowed from the brothers because she was struggling financially. Due to this, the brothers frequently went to her house and clinic to demand payment. At one point, they allegedly proposed that since she didn't have the money, she could repay them in a different way, by having sexual relations with them. Su Hong said she agreed to the brothers' proposal, but later regretted it and wanted to back out. However, they told her it was too late and that she would have to repay the debt this way. She claimed that as the encounters with the brothers continued over the following days, she began to feel worthless and desperately sought a way out. According to her, her life worsened with each passing day. She also stated that Liu, the older brother, had fallen in love with a woman from outside the village and was planning to marry her. As a result, he allegedly told Su Hong that he would stop having relations with her on the condition that she repay her entire debt with interest. On April 26, 2010, Su Hong invited Liu to her home, telling him she had the money to pay him. Before Liu arrived, she crushed 16 sleeping pills into powder and placed them inside 2 capsules. When Liu arrived, she convinced him to take the pills by telling him they were Viagra and that she wanted to sleep with him. Liu, excited, took the pills, and shortly afterward he passed out. Su Hong then took a rope and strangled him. She wrapped his body in a sheet and tied it with a rope. 3 days later, she used the same method on Lao Liu, killing him just as she had killed his brother. Su Hong completed the crime by disposing of the bodies of the 2 brothers in her family's basement. It seemed like the case was resolved. The police had found the bodies, Su Hong had confessed, and she was already in custody. However, the case was far from over. Remember the human feces I mentioned that were found in the basement? Well, after analysis, the police determined that those feces had been there much longer than the brothers' bodies. Initially, the police believed that Su Hong had somehow kept the brothers captive in the basement and fed them before killing them. But Su Hong's confession did not mention anything about this. So whose feces were they? This is where the story takes a more macabre turn. The police conducted a thorough investigation of the basement where the victims' bodies were found. They removed all the trash, cleaned the area, and decided to dig a bit more. During this new excavation, they discovered a human skeleton. The skeleton belonged to a woman and had been there for a long time. Just as with the bodies of the two brothers, the police removed the skeleton from the basement and took it for analysis. DNA samples were collected and later compared with those of relatives of missing persons in the region. The results came back quickly, revealing that the skeleton belonged to a woman named Li Shuiying, who was Su Hong's sister-in-law. After this discovery, the police brought Su Hong in for questioning again. She was asked multiple times about the skeleton found in her basement, but the woman claimed to know nothing about it. Only after 2 days of interrogation did Su Hong decide to confess to this other crime, with the victim being Li Shuiying. Psychiatrists who evaluated Su Hong stated that past events in her life were significant factors in her becoming a criminal. Su Hong was born in 1970 in Ning'an, a city with just over 400,000 inhabitants located in northern China. She had a younger brother and sister, and she was responsible for taking care of them and performing most of the household chores under her parents' orders. At school, Su Hong studied to become a doctor and enrolled at Ning'an Health School in 1986. After graduating, she was assigned to work as an intern at the Second People's Hospital. Her time at this hospital was short, as in 1990 she left her position and moved to Xinhua, where she opened a small clinic. In 1994, Su Hong married her high school sweetheart. This decision was not well received by her family, as she gave up her medical career for the marriage. After getting married, Su Hong moved to her husband's house in a different village. Their marriage was unstable from the start. Her husband was unfaithful and cheated on her with several women. When she found out, Su Hong wanted to divorce him, but her parents convinced her not to. Divorce was strongly disapproved of in the region and would likely ruin Su Hong's reputation and delay her life. Later, she became pregnant by her husband. It was a girl. Su Hong believed that the birth of her daughter would save their marriage, but instead, her husband was completely indifferent to the child and left all the care to Su Hong. When Su Hong's daughter was 9 months old, her husband left the village to work in southern China. Since the family's only source of income was her husband's salary, and he was now practically on the other side of China, Su Hong was left without financial support, as her husband did not send money when she needed it. As a result, Su Hong took her daughter and returned to the village of Xinhua, where she reopened her clinic. In Xinhua, in addition to managing her clinic, she also had to take care of her parents and her nieces and nephews, as her siblings, like her husband, had also gone to work in southern China. The clinic did not generate enough money to support so many people, and eventually she also had to work on a farm to earn extra income. In 2001, Su Hong learned through others that while working in southern China, her husband had started a relationship with a local woman. Her husband and this woman were living together and expecting a child. This was the last straw for Su Hong, who divorced her husband and decided to rebuild her life in Xinhua. In February 2003, Su Hong's sister returned to the village of Xinhua and sought her out, saying she was very afraid of her husband. Su Hong's sister was married to Yan Bingtao and wanted to divorce him. They had a trivial argument, but Bingtao became violent and assaulted her. Upon returning to Xinhua, Su Hong's sister tried to hide at Su Hong's house, but Bingtao tracked her down. Su Hong tried to persuade Bingtao to leave, but he refused. Bingtao told Su Hong that if she didn't return his wife, she and her family would pay dearly. Furious at this threat, Su Hong, in a fit of rage, grabbed a bottle and struck Bingtao on the head. The bottle caused a deep wound on Bingtao's head, and he fell to the ground, bleeding until he died. Desperate, Su Hong quickly called her father and explained what had happened. Su Hong's father came to her house and told her not to worry, as he would handle everything. He dragged Bingtao's body outside and placed it near a tractor. He then poured gasoline over Bingtao's body, covered it with a pile of weeds, and set it on fire. Su Hong told the authorities that she did not see what happened afterward and did not know what had become of Bingtao's remains. After Su Hong's father disposed of Bingtao's remains, she used his phone to send a text message to his family, pretending to be him. The message stated that he would be working in the south of the country and would return only after saving a significant amount of money. The message was convincing enough that Bingtao's family never reported his disappearance to the authorities. In November 2005, Li Shuiying, Su Hong's sister-in-law, who was married to Su Hong's brother, returned to the village of Xinhua after her work contract in Ningbo ended. It was Li Shuiying's skeleton that the police found in Su Hong's basement in 2010. The reunion between Su Hong and Li Shuiying was far from pleasant. Li Shuiying requested a loan of 10,000 yuan from Su Hong, and when Su Hong refused, Li Shuiying verbally attacked her. Later that day, Su Hong's mother informed her that Li Shuiying was involved in an affair which could tarnish the family's reputation. Fueled by her growing anger towards her sister-in-law, Su Hong decided to take drastic action. Su Hong then took a rope and began to strangle her sister-in-law until she lost consciousness. Once Li Shuiying was unconscious, Su Hong placed her in the basement and secured the entrance with blankets and trash bags to muffle any potential noises. Su Hong kept Li Shuiying locked in the basement and fed her sporadically for a few days. Later, she decided to end it by putting a mixture of medications in Li Shuiying's food, which resulted in the woman's death. With Li Shuiying already deceased, Su Hong dug a deep hole in the basement and buried her. To mislead Li Shuiying's family, Su Hong used the same strategy she had with Bingtao, but instead of using a cell phone to send a text message, she wrote a letter pretending to be her sister-in-law and left it at her family's home. The letter stated that Li Shuiying had left the village with her lover to live and work in an unspecified large city. It made it clear that no one should search for her as she wanted to be happy. Since many people in the village, including Li Shuiying's family, were aware of her extramarital affair, no one suspected the letter, and no one bothered to verify its authenticity. To mask the foul smell that began emanating from her basement, Su Hong started discarding organic waste there so that no one would become suspicious. Su Hong's mother passed away in 2006 and her father in 2008. Su Hong's father was the only one who knew the location of Bingtao's remains, so the remains of the man were never found. Su Hong would likely never have been caught if it weren't for the investigation into the disappearances of Liu and Lao Liu. Once her story became public and was covered in news reports across China, many people felt immense sympathy for her. These same people hoped that she would receive a light sentence. On the other hand, Su Hong wanted to be sentenced to the maximum penalty, which was capital punishment. In a statement, she said it was better for her to leave this world than to be released and have everyone know what she had done. In January 2011, Su Hong's trial took place, and she was quickly found guilty. The woman made no attempt to defend herself and confessed to all her crimes. She stated in court that the only thing she was concerned about was how her daughter and the nephews she had cared for, as if they were her own children, would fare. Ultimately, the Mudanjiang City Court sentenced Su Hong to death. On February 10, 2012, Su Hong was executed.